Good afternoon, everybody. Just for those of you who are following the text from the Jetsunma translation, I've now switched over to a translation because I just was reading it and it's very nice and clear. And I believe that this is actually translated from both the Tibetan and the Sanskrit. It's by Alan Wallace and his wife, Dr. Jetsunma Wallace. Dr. Jetsunma Wallace is a Sanskrit scholar, and Alan Wallace is a Tibetan scholar, and so they collaborated on this, and so I won't have the problem of the discrepancies between the previous translation, and it looks very clear. Okay, so what I wanted to okay, the previous just a few of the previous texts, so that we can go on to the next one, which is he's giving alternate views. So this is his view first, which we just did this morning. Just as sharp pain arises, although one does not desire it, so anger forcibly arises, although one does not desire it. A person does not intentionally become angry, thinking, I shall get angry. Nor does anger originate thinking, I shall arise. Right? So that's what we did this morning, but I think it's put very clearly here. There's no intention behind it. It just comes up due to causes and conditions. All offences and vices of various kinds arise under the influence of conditions. They do not rise independently. An assemblage of conditions. An assemblage of conditions means, it doesn't matter what it means. It means the sense organ, the sense object, and the consciousness which connects them. We see something because we have a sense organ and because we have a sense consciousness. And there's an object to be seen. So these three coming together are conditions. Where are we? An assemblage of conditions doesn't have the intention, I shall produce, nor does that which is produced have the intention, I have been produced. So in other words, when we see something, it's not that there's the intention on the part of the object or the sense organ or the sense consciousness to be seen. Just naturally, because the three of them come together, it happens spontaneously because all the causes and conditions have come together. It's not that they intend to come together, they just naturally do. If one is absent, then it won't come together. For example, if we are blind, if we don't have a sense organ, then we will, even though there are objects, we cannot see them. Or if we are unconscious, then even though we have an eye organ and an object, because there is no connection with the eye consciousness, then we don't see. When all three come together, then spontaneously, naturally, there is the act of seeing or the act of hearing or whatever. Right? All the causes and conditions come together, but there's no actual intention behind it. It just naturally comes because the conditions are there for it to arise. Right? Because then, these two verses are the ones which is, three verses which are the ones in which he's criticizing the Sankhya view and then the Vaisheshika view. That which is regarded as the primal substance and that which is construed as the self in the Purusha, here not Atman Purusha, do not originate thinking, I shall come into being. And So the comment on that, and then since it has not arisen, how could it wish to come into existence? Since it engages with objects, it cannot strive to cease either. So here's a commentary on that, not mine. Addressing the fundamental existence of the Sankhya school, Shantideva points out that the Purusha, the Atman or the self, and Prakrit or primal substance, which are regarded as ultimate in those schools, because in themselves uncaused, are illogical concepts. Something uncaused obviously does not function within the realm of causality. So they could therefore be not responsible either for our sufferings or for the existence of the phenomenal world as maintained by the Sankhya. If the self is permanent and immutable, it follows that its apprehension of an object must be permanent also. A succession of different perceptions is impossible. Thus, the self unto another being cannot become hostile towards us. If it is hostile now, it must always have been so and will remain so permanently, which is absurd. Sorry. So it's the idea that if there is something permanent and unchanging at the center of everything, ourself, as something completely permanent and never being changed, then it could not have any relationship with anything outside it, because if it did, then it would change. And it doesn't change, according to them, therefore there cannot be that existing, because if something is unchanging, then it would never have any link with causality, which would cause it to change. So, I mean, later in the ninth chapter on, on wisdom, then he goes into this in much greater detail. He's just ticking this one off in case somebody stands up and defends the Sankhya school. Well, that's your refutation there. So if you've got it, you've got it, and if you didn't, too bad. Anyway, whatever. Right. He's just debating schools which were extant in his day. Tibetans still debate the same schools, which ceased to exist 1,000 years ago, but nonetheless are relevant if you happen to be studying logic. Which is interesting because they don't debate the later schools. They don't debate Vedanta, for example, which would be much more relevant, since actually people exist in this day and age who follow Vedanta. Why don't they debate that one? Instead of debating Indian schools which died out hundreds of years ago. Somebody ask the Dalai Lama that, please. Well, it would be more relevant. Actually, on that subject of Vedantas, because I'm sure some of you have studied Vedanta, I'll never get through this text, forget. I was at a conference a few years ago in Kashmir, in Srinagar, which was called Self and Non-Self. And it was supposed to be a debate between the Hindu and Buddhist concepts, the Hindus being the Atman, and of course Buddhists being the Anatman. And among the participants was a very learned Swami, and he upheld Vedanta by quoting the whole way through in Sanskrit Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka Karika. And he said that Nagarjuna had the perfect Vedantic view and that Sri Shankaracharya had gone astray. He diluted it from the pure view of Nagarjuna. It was very beautiful to hear the Madhyamaka Karika quoted in Sanskrit. I mean, he would translate it, but he was, doing the original from Sanskrit. He felt that that was indeed the perfect view, but it was the perfect Vedantic view. So now you know. Okay. If the permanent self is not sentient, because some of the Vaishesikas say that the permanent self is beyond the mind, and that it interacts with the mind, but it is not the mind, it's beyond mind. If the permanent self is not sentient, that means not conscious, it is obviously inactive, like space. Even in conjunction with conditions, what activity does the immutable have? So, he says, the Tibetan says, if the self is permanent, it obviously would be inactive like space. Even if it were to come into contact with other influences, what activity would the immutable, the unmovable, have? Right? So if something is completely static and unchanging, then it could never have any relationship with something happening on the outside. It would never be able to even apprehend anything outside of itself. So this is where he's also... So here the commentary on that says, turning to the Vaisheshika concept of an ultimately real and permanent self, Shantideva argues that this too is illogical. As before, something that is permanent does not operate on the level of causality. Furthermore, something permanent cannot bring about changes, because to be permanent surely implies being unchanging, yet to meet with other factors and interact with them requires change. The self is distinct from the mind and is regarded as knowable. It is an object rather than the subject of consciousness. But if the self is permanent, how could it meet with new experiences and assimilate them? So in the Sankhya system, the self is conscious. In the Vaisheshika system, the self is unconscious. Madhyamaka refutes both extremes of metaphysical speculation. Right? Just so you know. What is the use of action to the self, capital letter, which at the time of action is the same as it was before? If the relationship is that it has action, then which of the two is the cause of the other? Yes. Thus, everything is dependent on something else. And even that on which something is dependent is not autonomous. Hence, why would one get angry at things that are inactive, like apparitions? Therefore, we can appreciate that everything is conditioned by other factors and therefore not responsible for its functioning like a magical illusion. Knowing this reality of conditionality, we are free to give rise to conditions now, which in the future will allow us to overcome suffering. Furthermore, we are also able to understand and cope with the provocative behavior of other people. So if everything is conditioned and everything is changing, then there is hope to make a difference in the future. If everything is static, if the basic self is unmoving, unchanging, and completely static, then there is no hope for anything to ever change. But if we are really just causes and conditions, then we can change the causes and conditions, and things can change. In the future, it will be different. So there's, okay, qualm. This means a question. Somebody's doubting, right? Averting anger is inappropriate. For who averts what? Response. It is appropriate because it is a state of dependent origination and is considered to be the cessation of suffering. So somewhere it says, sorry, this is very obscure to me, might be clear to you. Anyway, somewhere I read that the question is that if we do not exist as a permanent self, then who is there? It's not appropriate to think that who is being, as it says here, it's inappropriate to try to stop anger, because who is trying to stop what? If ultimately we do not exist as we see ourselves to exist, then there's nobody to stop anything. And so therefore, it's all emptiness, so to speak. And the answer was, in this other commentary I read, well, on an ultimate level that is true. On an ultimate level there is no anger and no one to be angry and no one to be angry to avert the anger or deal with it or anything like that. On an ultimate level, yes, right, it's all empty. But we are not on an ultimate level, we are on a relative level. And on a relative level, it makes sense to avert anger and to transform it and to cultivate patience. I don't know where that came from, but that's what they said. So, therefore, upon seeing a friend or an enemy committing a wrong deed, one should reflect, such are his conditions, and be at ease. In other words, we shouldn't worry too much about other people doing bad things or wrong things by judging them too much. We should see that these are due to their own causes and conditions, mostly of it, as with anger, unintentional, but due to causes and conditions, anger arises, and therefore we needn't be so judgmental. We can just say, right now he's very upset due to prior causes and conditions. No reason for me to react by also becoming all upset and angry and we can accept it. Doesn't mean that we, rejoice in his anger, but it does mean that we don't have to get all flustered and angry in return. We can just accept that none of this really was intended. This is just the way it is, due to various, maybe his upbringing or the circumstances, or because of, he had he suffers from indigestion or something. We don't know what caused these people to be angry. Why did they get angry? Or what is, the whole patterning coming behind it, including the karmic results coming from before. So rather than getting all worried and angry and upset and judgmental, we can just accept that this situation is arising because of causes and conditions, and now let's see how we can deal with it spiritually. That's the idea. If all beings would find fulfillment according to their own wishes, then no one would suffer, for no one wishes to suffer. I mean, everybody would rather be happy than not unhappy. This is one thing we all have in common, and it's something very important for us to remember, that every single being that we meet, not just human beings, but animals, dogs and monkeys and birds and all beings, in their heart would rather feel well than feel unhappy. All beings want happiness. I mean, some people have very weird ideas of happiness, but nonetheless, essentially everybody wants to feel okay. And their wishes should be fulfilled and they should be right. Okay, good. So, if that happened, then nobody would ever suffer. Including poor little Pema, who's hungry and thinking, Mummy doesn't love me, she's not giving me. So, he says, if all beings would find fulfillment according to their own wishes, then no one would suffer. For no one wishes to suffer. We all want to be happy. It's just that we don't know how. And we look for happiness in all the wrong things. People hurt themselves with thorns and like out of negligence, with fasting and so, out of anger, and by desiring to obtain inaccessible women and so forth. So people do all sorts of weird things, have you noticed, in this world? You know, really, really, really things which hurt themselves, but they're wanting that somehow or other that will give them satisfaction, that will be okay. This is why we have so many problems. People do horrible things to themselves, thinking that somehow that suffering will lead to some kind of satisfaction. We can see this very well in the modern world. Look at the funny things people do. So people hurt themselves with thorns or needles and the like, out of negligence, with fasting and so, out of anger, and by desiring to attain women or men or anybody that they want and they can't get, and then they go to all sorts of extremes to get the person they want, and they just mess themselves up completely. Some kill themselves by hanging, from jumping off from cliffs, eating poison, unwholesome circumstances, and by non-virtuous conduct, like drinking too much, taking drugs, or in search of something, but in the end just destroying themselves. I mean, we know this is not, 8th century India. We're talking about 21st century world. The suicide rate is soaring, often in the most affluent countries, and often among the young and the most privileged. And drugs, of course, are endemic now, everywhere. And they destroy us completely. And cause people to do very unvirtuous actions and make extremely negative karma. Alcohol, extreme fasting, anorexia. I mean, this is not something which he's talking about around Nalanda University. I mean, this is something which is very prevalent in our modern day society, while people are searching for happiness and satisfaction, and how much they destroy themselves and their families and society. We haven't learned much in all these years. We are still very, very deluded and still very, very much activated by the negative emotions within us, which promise so much pleasure and satisfaction and completely delude us into, endless darkness. So, some kill themselves by hanging, jumping from cliffs, eating poison and other unwholesome circumstances, and by non-virtuous conduct. That sums up society today. I mean, of course, there's lots of goodness in the world, isn't there? But there's also a lot of very troubled society out there, just as he's saying. When under the influence of mental afflictions, they kill even their own dear selves in this way, then how could they have restraint towards the bodies of others? So in other words, if we are so busy killing even ourselves who we love the most in all the world, is it surprising that also people injure and kill other beings who are, not themselves even? If you do not have compassion towards those who, intoxicated by mental afflictions, commit suicide, then why does anger arise? Even if compassion virtually never arises towards such people, due to their mental afflictions, what's the point of getting angry? Well, I'm sure most people do have compassion towards people who commit suicide. I mean, it's very sad. Anybody who gets to the point of feeling so completely lost that there's no hope for anything in the future. I mean, I would think most people would feel compassion towards them, not anger. Why would you feel angry? If inflicting harm on others is the nature of the foolish, then my anger towards them is as inappropriate as it would be towards fire, which has the nature of burning. So anybody who harms others is trapped in their own negative afflictions, which are going to cause them suffering not only in this lifetime but in future lifetimes because of the negative karma they're having. So therefore, again, it's not appropriate to be angry with that. Any more than we're angry with fire. We may try to put the fire out, and we may try to deal with the fire if it's spreading, but we're not angry with the fire. Because the fire, its nature is to burn. And so these people, because of their delusions and because of their negative afflictions, it's become their nature to be angry and do stupid things and harm other people. So therefore, it's not appropriate to be angry with them. We should have compassion for them. Because they're creating lots of problems now, and they are going to receive the result of that in many, many lifetimes to come, or even in this lifetime. Because, as he said before, they will lose their friends, people don't like them, they fall out of harmony with everybody. If you have an angry nature, it's not a happy life. So therefore, to be angry towards people who have angry natures doesn't make sense. We need to feel compassion. That doesn't mean that we just justify what they're doing, but it does mean that we recognize that they are in a grip of very powerful emotions which they seem to have no control over, and which cause suffering not just to others, but also to themselves. If this fault is adventitious, and if sentient beings are good by nature, then anger towards them is inappropriate, as it would be towards pungent smoke in the sky. So what he's saying is that if we are inherently angry, then we shouldn't be upset with people who are inherently angry, if it's their nature. I see what he's saying. If it's their nature, because just as fire burns, we're not angry with fire for burning, because that's the nature of fire. Of course, Buddhism does not say that we are by nature angry. But he's putting the other side. If, rather than that, our negative emotions are adventitious means that they are not inherent, that they come into being, but they are not part of the basic nature of the thing. You could say that tarnish on a silver pot is adventitious. And because it's adventitious, it's not part of the nature of a silver pot, therefore it can be cleaned. This is a very important point. All of our negative emotions, even if we had them from birth, Some babies are very placid like Pema. Some babies are very angry and difficult right from the birth. But even if right from a very early age we had a very angry temperament, nonetheless that is not our true nature. Because it is not our true nature, it is adventitious, we can change it. If it was our true nature to be angry and greedy and jealous, then we could never change it. You can't change a clay pot into a silver pot, no matter how much you rub it. Right? Do you understand? But if these negative emotions, however deep-seated they may seem to be, are not inherent to us, then they can be changed. Because that's not who we truly are. Our true nature is completely pure and perfect. It's only that we have, from a Buddhist point of view, through many lifetimes, practiced in ways which sometimes were not very skillful, and so we have these habitual propensities which we bring into this life too. So we have bad propensities, like we might be angry, or we might be greedy, or we might be jealous. Or we have good propensities, like we might be musical, artistic, very compassionate, very generous, just naturally, from very small children. They are, even within a family, the siblings are often very different from each other, because from a Buddhist point of view, they are carrying over traits and habits which were cultivated in previous lives. So in this lifetime, you carry on those habits, but they can change, because however thick the tarnish, it can, with a lot of rubbing, be cleaned. Because our true nature is completely okay. But he's saying that if our faults or our negative emotions is adventitious, and if sentient beings are good by nature, then anger towards them is inappropriate, as it would be towards smoke in the sky. People make bonfires, and then there's a lot of very smelly smoke, pungent smoke in the sky. But, it's going to disappear. The sky, the space is pure. It's just that at this time, the smoke is arising. But we're not angry with the smoke or the sky, because there's smoke on it. Because we know that normally the sky is completely clear and beautiful. So, therefore, we are not angry with that, disregarding the principal cause, such as a stick and the like one. If I become angry with the one who impels it, then it is better if I have hatred, because that person is also impelled by hatred. What? I'm really lost. I'm sorry. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I've read it wrong. That's my problem. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, it does make sense. Okay. Disregarding the principal cause, such as a stick, someone's beating you up, right? So the principal cause of the harm is being somebody is a stick, right? So disregarding the principal cause, such as a stick and the like, if I become angry, rather I'm not angry with the stick, right? Normally I would be angry with the person that's hitting, right? Right? So if I become angry with the one who impels it, the one who beats you, then it is better if I hate hatred, because that person is also impelled by hatred. So in other words, rather than being angry with the person who is beating us up, we're not angry with the stick. When somebody has a stick and is beating us, we don't feel anger towards the stick, we feel anger towards the person. But just as the stick is the instrument for the beating, likewise that person is the instrument of the anger. Therefore, I should feel angry or hatred towards the anger in that person, not towards the person. Yes? Yes? Okay. So we have anger towards the negative emotion. If we have to have anger towards anything, then we should be angry towards the emotion, not towards the actual person, who themselves, as he's been talking before, is out of control, hasn't deliberately decided to become angry, but is controlled by the anger. So the problem is the anger, not the person who exhibits the anger. In the past, I too have inflicted such pain on sentient beings. Therefore, I, who have caused harm to sentient beings, deserve that in return. So, the idea again is that of karma, that we would never be harmed if we ourselves had not harmed others in the past. It's not that we're therefore condoning people to, oh well, it's, if somebody is harmed, well, it's your own fault because you must have hurt other people in the past and too bad. It's not that. But nonetheless, from our side, when negative things happen to us, bad things happen to us, one way of dealing with that, also with sickness, is to think, well, I created the causes and conditions for this to happen. When good things happen, in the West, you see it a lot, when good things happen, people are happy to take the responsibility for their good karma. Oh, I must have done something really good in the past because... But they don't want to take responsibility for their bad karma. So then they don't want to think that what I'm suffering now is the result of things which I have done in the past, which brought about this particular... I had sowed some poisonous seeds as well as good seeds. The point with karma, I feel, we shouldn't be too simplistic. From a Buddhist perspective, as from a Hindu's perspective, we've had countless lifetimes in so many different realms of existence. And in all that time, all our intentional actions of body, speech, and mind are planting seeds. Now, some seeds which are accompanied by positive qualities like generosity, kindness, loving kindness, and so forth, plant wholesome seeds. And those which are accompanied by negative roots like anger and greed and jealousy and ignorance, plant negative roots. Now, zillions and billions beyond thought, these causes waiting for the conditions to rise. Like if you plant many, many seeds in a field, when the sunshine and the rain comes, up they come. But we don't know what is going to come, when. For this reason, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. It's not just from causes and conditions right now. It's from causes and conditions which were planted maybe lifetimes ago. We don't know when they're going to come up, how they're going to come up. So it's no good wondering, what did I do, what did he do in a past life which created this now? We don't know. We don't know what created the fact that we get reborn in the position which we do, and we experience the things which we do. The point is not what happened in the past, that's gone. The point is, right now, how am I responding to what is happening? Positively or negatively? Positively or negatively, sweetheart? That's the point. Because moment to moment, we are eating up our past and creating our future. So it's at this very moment, just now, this is where we have the choice. To be skillful or unskillful. Doesn't matter what's happening. It can be a very outwardly negative situation, but if we respond positively, then it turns out actually that's a good thing. Many, many people, you know, have said they had life-threatening accidents or sickness or the loss of a loved one, real anguish, real pain, and that brought them up with a jolt to recognize how fragile life is, how precious it is, how they were wasting it, and how can I do something meaningful with this lifetime now. And so then they're grateful for that accident or that loss or the sickness or whatever it was. It looked like outwardly the most negative thing that could happen, turned out to be the most positive. Depending how we use it. So this is the point. If we think of it from the point of view of karma, then even if somebody does something very negative, if we respond with understanding and compassion in replacement of that, then that is actually a very helpful thing that happened. It's not negative at all. Negative is only due to our conceptual thinking mind. If it pleases the ego, it's nice, it's good. And if it doesn't, then it's a bad thing. Right? It's very childish. The small children, when they have something which is nice, then they're happy, happy, happy. And when they're thwarted, then they throw a tantrum. And, so we should not act like 4-year-olds. We should try to take everything which happens to us and make use of it on the path. So, right, so disregarding the principal cause, such as a stick and the like, if I become angry with the one who impels it, who uses it, then it's better if I hate hatred, because that person is impelled by hatred. So just as the stick is impelled by the person is impelled by his hatred. So let's go backwards. That's what we have to direct our disapproval of. Not the person, but the negative emotion, which causes him to create harm. In the past, I too have inflicted such pain on sentient beings. The point is that, why is somebody hitting me now? Because in the past I must have hit somebody. Otherwise I wouldn't be hit. Therefore, I, who have caused harm to sentient beings, deserve that in return. So the idea is that instead of being angry with somebody for what they've done to us, we recognize that this is the result of negative karma, which we ourselves have sown in past lives or in this lifetime, and therefore we deserve it, and it's no problem. We've squared the balance now. I mean, many Tibetans and others, when they get very sick, they say, well, this is good, this is purifying negative karma. And so then, instead of getting all upset about being sick, I mean, of course they try to cure themselves. That would also be karma, if they can cure. But nonetheless, instead of just feeling, why is this happening to me? They can say, well, because I created the causes and conditions at some point, and naturally it's going to happen to me. Why shouldn't it? That's okay. I've cleared that now. And if one accepts things joyfully, then one is at the same time making lots and lots of positive, influences for the future. So you're taking on the bad, you're clearing the bad, and creating good in its place. So therefore be happy. That's the idea. Everything which happens to us comes because we ourselves have created causes and conditions. Can't blame anyone else. So both his weapon and my body are causes of suffering. He has obtained a weapon, I have obtained a body. With what should I be angry? Blinded by craving, I have obtained this boil, which appears as a human body, which cannot bear to be touched. When there is pain, with whom should I be angry? So again, it's a matter